Welcome to Vibrant Publishers podcast, where we interview experts in various fields to share their insights and knowledge with our listeners. Today, we are joined by Michael Pace, who is a seasoned expert in project management, holding multiple certifications and degrees in project management, portfolio management, agile methods, and applying sustainability to projects. His current focus is sustainable business, serving as Director of Academic Practice for GPM Global. In addition to his work at Texas A&M University, helping organizations make sense of what sustainable business means. Michael, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Could you start by giving our audience a brief overview of a background and experience in project management and especially on the focus on sustainability?
Sure. I actually have a pretty unusual background, as my undergraduate and master's degrees are in forensic science. When I was in college, I thought I'd be, digging up dead things and doing crime scene investigation work. Out of school, I ended up at a startup laboratory. I found myself really good at organizing work, and I was in the right place at the right time to wind up with this job title of a project manager. Then I had to figure out what that was and how to do it. Got pretty good at it, wound up traveling to different companies doing projects, fixing project management. I eventually went back to school for my PhD in business, specializing in project management with the ultimate goal of teaching at a university. I eventually made my way into academia as an assistant professor of practice before moving back to projects, strategy, operations work. And as you said, I now split my time as GPM's Director of Academics, as well as the Director of Operations for Texas A&M's Marketing and Communications Division. Those, along with a few board memberships and work on a second doctorate in education, focusing on education for sustainability, keep me pretty busy. And you did mention the focus on sustainability. And I think that the education and sustainability really go hand in hand. If we can teach someone to do it right in the first place, versus always having to fix mistakes, we'd all be better off. And through some of those academic studies that I've been through, I came upon this concept of sustainability and the role that projects can play in sustainable business. And from there, I was really hooked with it.
Right, sounds great. Now, my first question to you is, how do you define a sustainable business and why is it crucial in today's corporate landscape? And if you could share some examples of successful implementation of the same.
Traditionally, the definition of sustainable business would be something like doing business without harming the environment. And what we're seeing more and more is that that's not nearly good enough. The philosophy of do no harm doesn't do anything to repair the damage that we've already done. So focusing on just the environment also ignores the broad social challenges that are involved in sustainability. And that's really what we see with sustainable business, this idea that it's not just about profit. It's not just about doing no harm to the planet, but there's social aspects as well.
Right.
A good company that we could look at, you said mentioning examples, Patagonia tends to be an easy example. It minimizes the social and environmental impacts of their business, all without sacrificing the economic component. Over the years, I've been able to observe firms like Impetus, which is a textile producer in Portugal. When I visited as they were cutting patterns, I noticed that this huge amount of scrap was produced, and I just assumed it was going to be greenwashing. But turns out I was totally wrong. They had these giant vacuum systems that sucked all that scrap back into their process. The scraps were recycled or reused for different products. So they really, that's an example there of reuse, reduce, recycle. We also see things like cork farms, olive oil groves, alpaca herds. There are all types of different examples that we could talk about of not just doing good, not just business as usual, but repairing some of the damage we've already done.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Now, with multiple certifications and degrees in project management, portfolio management, agile methods, and sustainability, how do you see these aspects converging in sustainable business practices?
Well, projects are inherently change agents. You're doing something that's not already in existence. It's a different group of people, a different product, a different process. It's something new. Project managers have to help a group of stakeholders march toward some unseen future. And it just makes total sense that projects be a vehicle for embedding sustainability into businesses. That's one of the reasons I've gotten involved with GPM. They were the first to create tools, standards, frameworks to help firms consider sustainability and do that through project management.
Okay. And as the director of academic practice for GPM, can you tell us about your role and how Global contributes to sustainable business practices?
Yeah, GPM is a training and consulting firm that really is focused on sustainable business. The GPM originally stood for Green Project Management, but we're really expanding that into sustainable business. They've invented frameworks like P5. They've got tools like the P5 impact analysis, and they've really led the way for green project management. Lately, we've been expanding that into portfolio management, project sponsorship, leadership. We're going to be rolling out some strategy type tools and classes here in a little bit, looking at how we can do whole organization efforts in sustainability. My role with GPM is to create the courses, some of which lead to certification and certification exams. But I also go and I train clients who ask for in-person training. I consult when I'm called upon on how to actually do sustainability in a business. We're also expanding our offering for universities and academic programs, be that guest lecturers. We also have kind of PowerPoint decks and assignments and exercises and exams, all of that stuff. And we actually can partner together to get students certified in green project management.
Okay, got it. Now, while sustainability in business is a great idea, what are some of the common challenges that organizations can face when integrating sustainability into their business strategies and how they can overcome it?
Now, this is just my opinion, but what I've seen personally and professionally is it's this lack of purpose or the wrong purpose. We are continually being hit by this 1980s MBA thinking that the main goal of a company is profit. And so if profit is that main goal, every single action will be spun around to achieve profit. But what we're seeing more broadly is if you think about a bigger purpose, it makes some of those integration of sustainability practices, it makes that integration easier. So
Right.
said differently, what we have to do is move from a company goal of creating value that's tied up in the form of some type of profit to the company has a goal of creating value to multiple types of stakeholders. And by doing that, by creating value, they actually can realize profit kind of as a benefit.
Got it. Got it. And let's talk about agile a little bit. And agile methods have gained quite a lot of popularity in project management. So, how can agile methodologies be aligned with sustainability goals? And do they complement each other effectively?
Sure, it's surprising to me. Agile continues to be this buzzword. I used to tell my students, I now tell my clients that it's really a drinking game. How many times will a speaker at a conference say that we need to be agile and pivot to achieve some new level of synergy? When the facts are, the Agile Manifesto is over 20 years old now. Some of the major advancements in Agile are way older than that. So for example, I was recently asked by a client to consult on a new project management information management system. So their computer software. All of the choices that were shortlisted for that client had visual boards to track tasks and statuses like to do, doing, or done. They thought it was awesome. It was really cool and shiny. No one really wants a
Oh,
Gantt chart anymore. But just that idea of a visual signboard, that's Kanban. And Kanban is almost 100 years old now. It was invented in the 1940s in Japan. So to get back to that question you asked though, I like the idea of agile being a verb. So being agile, being a descriptive that I'm going to be nimble, can also mean starting with a purpose and then adjusting that purpose if you find out that you're off course, adjusting that purpose to if you find out that you've run into unexpected roadblocks. The method that's used, Kanban, Scrum, Lean Six Sigma, plan driven, et cetera, et cetera. The method doesn't necessarily matter, but what's absolutely critical is the mindset, that mindset of driving value in a nimble way. And that's pretty cool.
okay, so could you expand on the mindset part a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, there's this false dichotomy that has emerged in project management. And what we hear colloquially is we say it's either waterfall or agile. With this conception, this misconception, really, that there's a school of methods that are you do one thing and then you do the next thing, you do the next thing, that are under this umbrella of waterfall. And if you actually look at it, the guy who coined the term back in the 1970s, a gentleman named Winston Royce, said, that's no way to run a project. But
Okay.
these camps have emerged that say waterfall is bad because you write things down a lot and then you stick to a plan, which anyone who is involved in a plan-driven project knows you have to have a plan and then you kind of do that. So, for example, a construction project. If you're building a 3 dozen story skyscraper in the middle of a city, you want blueprints, you want permits, you want a plan that you can follow. You don't want to be redoing things on the fly. That's just crazy. But this thing about being agile, the idea is don't blindly follow a plan. Be willing to adjust as you need to, and be open to new ideas, dialogue, discussions, all of that. And we could get into the nuts and bolts of how that works. But what we see is really in software development, where a customer may not know what they really want. I want it to be fast. I want it to be pretty. But until they see some ideas, until they see some prototypes, it's kind of a shot in the dark. So do a little bit, test out the water, do a little bit more, test out the water. That's really this idea that's at the root of being agile. Now, if you think back to sustainability, it's well, let's try this. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, let's try something else. And let's piece together a solution that works the best for us, for our organization, for us as a team of employees. The definition of us can be ambiguous, but that really doesn't matter. It's about how can we find a purpose, and then how can we make sure that we stay aligned to that purpose as we go along.
Correct. Thank you for sharing that. Now, could you talk about a little bit about the role of tools and technologies, and with the age of AI, what role do these things play in sustainability in business?
Sure, yeah. Well, when you think about AI, I was at a conference in Southeast Asia over the summer, and a group of researchers were talking about AI and project management with the overall question of, is AI going to replace the project manager? And we sat there for an hour, and they didn't give really any good answers. And eventually, I asked the question. I was like, "What I'm hearing is AI can help with a task, but it can't help manage a team." And they said, "No, no, absolutely not." So from a project perspective, AI is great at helping you be more efficient so you can do other things. I compare it to the turn of the 1900s into the 20th century, where machinery and conveyor belts and just more efficient ways to do things that allowed us to do other things that we wanted to do. So when we look at AI and sustainability, it gets incredibly more complicated. So if we look at AI as a tool, it can help us be more efficient. It can help us generate less waste. It can help us generate ideas for how to do all of that. I use a program called Claude. My colleague uses a program called Jasper. Everybody knows about ChatGPT. And I gotta tell you, like it's if I'm needing to brainstorm, I can ask Claude, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and it shoots out a bunch of answers. And then I go and I do the extra research, I build on it. My colleague will type up a paper, plug it into Jasper or ChatGPT and say, okay, what did I do wrong? And it can provide edits. So there's some great efficiencies that we can get with things like AI. Um, the problem that we have to be careful of, I mean, everybody's going to talk about robots taking over the planet and all that. And yes, absolutely. But when we talk sustainability, people, planet, and profit all have to be included in that. So employee rights comes into effect. How can we make sure that employees are upskilled to continue their job, that their jobs are not just replaced because a computer can do it? There's a it's a language company that just announced they were going to lay off several hundred people just in the last week or so because they're replacing that job as a translator with an AI tool that's going to do it. Well, that's not sustainable. You've now lost the human impact. You've lost the human knowledge inherent in those hundred or so people. You've decreased the morale of anybody who's left. So it really is a difficult tightrope we're all going to have to walk, that we don't use AI to abuse things like our employees, our stakeholders, our customers.
Right, thank you for sharing your opinion. Now, looking ahead in the future, what emerging trends do you foresee in sustainable business and how can organizations prepare for them?
Yeah, we're seeing a few trends globally. The big one tends to be it's getting harder for organizations to just ignore sustainability altogether. So, for example, the EU has the CSRD and the CSDDD. Those are mandatory reporting requirements that companies have to report on their sustainability efforts, and they have to do it in a certain format. The United States doesn't currently have mandatory reporting, but for years now, the SEC has been playing with guidelines and rules. We have several states within the US that are implementing laws. All of those examples, though, are companies being forced to do it. Dr. Joel Carboni, the CEO of GPM, likes to say that ESG, these ideas of outside entities forcing us to do sustainability reporting, ESG is outside in. It's an outside pressure that forces a company to be sustainable. And so that's a trend of this external pressure growing. But I think a deeper trend is employees want to work for a company, for a firm that has a purpose. The idea of don't kill the planet, you know, take care of biodiversity, treat employees fairly, that is continuing to grow throughout as different generations enter into the workforce. It's kind of interesting across multiple sectors. This past year, the United Kingdom had a large, what they call an industrial action. It's what others might call a strike. The university professors across the United Kingdom that are a member of this union refused to mark any kind of grades. They didn't grade papers, they didn't grade exams. It was industrial action, the strike, and it was because they were asking for fair pay. SAG-AFTRA here in the United States, the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, which I had to write that down because I knew I was going to say it wrong. That's a major union that represents different types of actors. They just completed a huge strike, and one of the big points for them, since you mentioned AI a second ago, is the use of AI to recreate their likenesses, their voices, and using that AI without permission or without compensation. And so just those are just two examples that people are just getting really tired of being cogs in this giant bureaucratic process. They want to feel like they're a part of something bigger. And I anticipate that internal pressure to just continue to grow in steam.
Got it. And how can companies measure the success of sustainable business projects, considering the multifaceted nature of sustainability?
Well, there's multiple different ways to do it. If you're looking at just checking a box, GRI is a huge name. I mentioned CSRD and CSTDD. There are different frameworks to focus really on what GPM does. GPM uses what's called the P5 framework, and it looks at people, planet, and profit, and it looks across both the processes that are being used and the final product that's being produced. So across those five lenses of people, planet, profit, process, and product, we look at 49 different elements and we analyze the impact of all that. And so if I've done my math right, all told, that's roughly 245 different things to consider. Now, that's incredibly complicated, and people might look at that and go, oh my God, but that really underscores one example here of one of our elements is training and qualifications. Does the project team get the training it needs to do the job? Does the project or the operations team that will end up owning that deliverable or that process, that product, do they get the training to continue doing the job? Now, some might say that training doesn't mean sustainability, but it really does. Academics have found pretty consistently that education plays a huge role in sustainability, and that learning sustainable practices, I mean, you don't do that without training, without education. But even bigger than that, educating and training allows for that individual to grow and to improve. By improving, they can create more value in new ways, both personally and professionally. There's an old comic strip here in the States that makes light of a training dilemma. And it's something that says, what's worse, training someone and they leave the company, or not training someone and they stay in the company? And that's probably 40 years old at this point. But it really underscores the importance of training and education. In fact, the United Nations included education as one of their items in their 2030 agenda with their sustainable development goals. So that's just looking at a piece of two different elements within the P5 framework. We look at things like water consumption and waste disposal. We look at labor relations. We look at artificial intelligence. We looked at protecting biodiversity. As you said, sustainability really is multifaceted. And it really does require a multidisciplinary approach to figure it all out and to account for as many things as possible. So this idea of training, it's going to just continue to grow. Sustainability really is a wicked problem. It fights against being solved. It's once you solve it once, it may not be able to be solved again in the same way. And so, yeah, we have to learn and grow in order to do it.
Got it. Now, my final question to you is what would be your call to action for businesses and professionals who are looking to contribute to a more sustainable future through their projects and initiatives?
Sure. I mean, realistically, the first step is knowledge. You have to learn more about what sustainability really means. Lots of people just assume it's recycle or what we would call responsible consumption, but it is much broader than that. So read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can watch documentaries on the subject about companies that have tried to do this. The two big ones that I've got sitting on my bookshelf are Patagonia and Unilever. So if anyone needs just a firm example, I mean, those are two really big names that a lot of people should know that are trying their best to figure the sustainability thing out. That really goes with the idea we all carry these assumptions about what sustainability is or what a sustainable business is, and assumptions can kill. They say that the first step in addiction is admitting you have a problem. And let's be honest, we have a problem. They just announced 2023 was the hottest year in record. So now is the time to learn as much as we can about how to stop repeating the same mistakes over and over, stop the harm that we're doing, and go that next step, repairing the damage so that we can have a brighter future. And I truly believe that we, as a collective, can be better.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael, for taking the time to join us today and sharing your valuable insights.
Thank you. I hope it was informative, and appreciate the opportunity.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we hope you found this podcast informative and insightful. Once again, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.